Murali End. Welcome to the show. We're here when you're high. We're here when you're low. Some days you're happy, some days you wanna when happy it's we, when mad it's them. It's the same place, Murali End. Sri Lanka cricket we gon' represent. So tell a friend.
Welcome to the Murali End. Welcome to our big World Cup preview. We're days away from the World Cup starting in Sri Lanka and India. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined by my cousin Dominic across the pond, Estelle Vasudevan in Sri Lanka, Nick Brooks, who's in South London. We pray for him. And Anton Roux, former Sri Lanka coach, who joins us from South Africa. Anton, you've been with the team at this stage, kind of in the last two T20 World Cups and another longer format World Cup as well. Let's just kind of get straight into it. What would you be expecting the squad would be doing? What would the coaches be doing? What would the management be doing just a few days before the World Cup all starts?
First of all, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a long time since I've been back on the show, but I've been watching your guys' programs all along, so it's good to see your familiar faces again. I think, first of all, how awesome it is to play a World Cup in your own country. So for the guys that are involved in that squad, I mean, you can't ask for anything better. It's a dream come true for them to play in front of their home ground, in front of their home fans. Sorry. So in saying that, I'm pretty sure by some way or another, they'll be talking to the groundsman, making sure that they'll get their pitches just right for the team. And I think, anyone who's going to be playing against Sri Lanka in Colombo, it's going to be a trial of spin. And then hopefully we'll see something similar to the old Palakele where, good batting tracks, a bit more pace and bounce, and hopefully a little bit more high scoring. So I think, their preparation before the World Cup against England is done. It's all about just crossing the T's and dotting the I's now and making sure that they figure out what's their best 11 come game one.
Yeah, what with your experience with Sri Lanka teams going to major tournaments, what would the atmosphere be like in amongst the players just a few days before kickoff?
Look, I think it's a nice, there's a good mixture of guys that have been in World Cups before. So I think the younger players will be leaning on them and just figuring out where their intensity is at during training and that sort of stuff. But you guys know Sri Lanka is pretty chilled out. The guys are pretty laid back. But like I said, one thing I know is that, when they walk out to on Premadasa in front of their home crowd, then all of a sudden the juices kick in. So, then you're in the thick of things. But off the field, they're pretty relaxed, pretty chilled. And I'm sure the guys can't wait to get stuck in.
Amazing. I'm quite excited. Estelle, you've been at some of the warm-up games. Speaking to the people around there, what's the kind of atmosphere like around those games? What's the atmosphere like in Colombo in general?
Yeah, it's been a bit low-key, I think, given the results we've seen from the Sri Lankan team over the last couple of weeks. There's not a lot of enthusiasm. I think a lot of people would have seen the kind of videos going around social media. The loss against England, that last loss against England was not well received. So, I mean, I know people are excited about hosting a World Cup or co-hosting a World Cup. You see people lining up to get tickets at the SLC headquarters and other venues. But about the team itself, I think compared to the World Cups that Anton's been involved in, I think there's a lot less enthusiasm and a lot less positivity around this campaign.
You made it sound like it's Anton that brings the vibes.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
No, I mean, Anton, right? Like the time we were in Australia and then the following World Cup as well. Like there was real hope that this team's going to do something.
I was actually thinking about it the other day. It's like, unfortunately, my two experiences with the team in the World Cups weren't our best showing in India and in Australia. But you're absolutely right. The lead up into those tournaments. I mean, we just won the Asia Cup in the T20s. and we had made the final in the Asia Cup in the 50 over competition. Unfortunately, we got bowled out for 50, which was not well received either. But the lead up to the tournament was completely different. So I can't speak for what it feels like at the moment. I wish I was there in Sri Lanka to feel that and witness that for myself. But nothing changes people's ideas and perceptions than a W in the column. So it's all about that first game, getting a win under the belt, and hopefully they'll take it from there.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to look at the squad, and then we'll kind of go through the initial group stages. Don't worry, we're not going to be one of those shows that plots Sri Lanka's path to the final and goes all the way through. We're not going to do that. I wonder, just to add to this squad, this is the squad that came out a few days ago. We know Isham Malenga. We think he's dislocated his shoulder in the second. It was the second T20, wasn't it? So we think he's going to be replaced by Dilshan Madushankar, but we haven't had any official confirmation. I wonder, Nick and Dom, if you guys kind of want to talk about that kind of top line, and then we kind of all chip in as we kind of go through it.
Yeah, well, I think it's really clear, isn't it, that those three guys, Pathum, Kamal, and Kusal, will be the top three. And I think it's no shock to anyone that how they go is going to have a massive bearing on how Sri Lanka do in this tournament, right? I think Kamal Mashara has made a really positive start to his T20 career. He's a left-hander, so he breaks up those two right-handers. He's got long levers. He can hit boundaries. Pathum has been going so hard over the past year. You want to see him just get into form and get big ones. And Kusal looks in great touch at the moment, which I think is really, really promising for Sri Lanka. I think there's this feeling that like Patis is everything, but we kind of like only need them to fire in a big game in the group stage. Like if one of them can put in a really good performance against Australia, that would be a massive boon for Sri Lanka, right? And hopefully those games against the nations who you'd expect Sri Lanka to beat, Oman, Ireland, and I'm going to say Zimbabwe, even though Sri Lanka have had some shocking results against them over the past 18 months or so. But yeah, hopefully some of the batters who haven't been striking quite as clean can find some form in those matches.
Yeah, I agree with Nick that this is the engine room of Sri Lanka's batting. This is where, if they're to make a run in this tournament, it's going to be on the back of these three guys making big runs and scoring them fast. I think we've seen very good intent. It's clear that they have a plan up top to attack the power play, to attack the first 10 overs, to stake this side a really good foundation from which to launch. A lot of credit goes to Pathum and Kusal, but also to Kamil Mashara stepping in and not being someone who slows them down, right? We talked so much about that partnership between Pathum and Kusal, but Kamil has been able to step in and in some big matches, especially against Pakistan, show that he has qualities and skills. And I think how these guys play is basically going to determine how far Sri Lanka goes, particularly with Nissanka and Kusal, and can they bring up those big performances, those big 80s, 90s, maybe 100 against one of the big sides. I think if that happens, you may see a couple of upsets come up.
Anton, you worked with Pathum and Kusal quite a bit during your time there. What was it you saw in those players that kind of impressed you? And kind of what's your hopes and aspirations for them? I'm asking you these questions like they're your children for this tournament.
Well, to be honest, I'm so proud and chuffed to see Pathum do really well in the last couple of months, even to a year or so, because the guy puts in a hell of a lot of work. He's a very nice, humble guy, and I cannot wish him better things than hopefully getting us across the line in a World Cup, coming up, because he's just it's so good to watch when he strikes the ball effortlessly and it still goes for six, even though with the small stature that he is. But he's got a sort of a tattooed body, and one of them is a lion, and he's without a doubt a massive lion within that team. So it's good to see him do well. And then obviously Kusal, I mean, he's one of those guys that every team sort of has. He's the talented guy, hasn't really shown the world what his talent is capable of. I think we all wish that he is a little bit more consistent. But in saying that, international cricket is tough. These guys do train hard. They do work on a few things. But yeah, when Kusal gets going, I mean, we've all seen these innings that he plays where, he plays shots that only he can play, So I think you guys have nailed it on the head. For me, I've written down in my notes here, the first 6 to 10 overs is going to be vital, especially on the pitches that we're going to get, to play on. So to get ahead of the game in those first 6 to 10 overs is crucial for Sri Lanka from a batting perspective. And I think that's where, their key lies. You also mentioned Kamil Mishra. I got to work with him a little bit towards the end. They were sort of bringing him back in again through the A team and whatnot. So it's really good to see him back in the fold since his misdemeanors. But he's a talented guy, and he can, if he's not going to be keeping with, he can give you a few good overs of off spin too. Like I've seen him bowl. He's a good fielder, so he's a bit of an all rounder even in the top 3 there. So it's an exciting top 3, I think. Yeah.
Just to say to people watching, I know there's lots of questions coming in for Anton. What we'll do, I think, is we'll kind of stick to our plan, and then I'll go through if there's anything that has been we haven't got to him, we'll put it to him, because otherwise it will just be kind of for Q&A and it'll be a bit chaotic. Nick and Dom, do you guys want to talk about the kind of like what our middle order is potentially looking like? And I think we probably need to have a little bit of a debate at this point. We'll bring Anton in about how we actually compose our 11.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on here. I probably see Pavan at 4 based on the intent that he showed through the England series. I think he looked promising, if not perfect yet. I would assume Charith bats at 5, and then I hope Dasan Shanaka bats at 6 to give Sri Lanka 5 proper bowlers, but I'm not sure that is what's going to happen. Dom, do you see it similarly to me?
Yeah, I mean, that would be what I would go with. And I mean, I think Kamindu could slot in at either of those 2 spots as well. Those are kind of the 3 guys that I see as being crucial. I think the thing that's been lacking, and I was kind of going through the results last night and this morning, is those kind of quick fires, 20 and 30s that really blast a T20 innings from like a decent effort into a great effort. And I think part of that is a role clarity issue. What are these guys here to do? Who's here to hit spin? Who's here to hit pace? What are the different roles that each of these players occupy? And I think that is the big thing that needs to be ironed out in the next few days, is what are the roles going to be and how is it going to evolve over time? We've talked about, does Sri Lanka have enough power hitters? I think that's a pretty big question. I think Dawson's been the one consistent power hitter that we've had. But I wonder if there are other resources that we can't use, like using Wanindu as a little bit of a pinch hitter to keep momentum going and things of that nature. I'm also curious what role KJP has in this squad. Is he here purely as a backup batter, or is he someone who has power and range of shots, particularly against spin, someone they might actually look to deploy in that middle order?
Yeah, and Anton, let's talk about the kind of middle order and our lack of ability to accumulate runs. In the last few World Cups, it seems to me like that's been the kind of issue. And I think one of the regrets that we've talked about extensively over the last few months of this channel has just been there appears to have been very little effort to kind of address it, or whatever they are doing just doesn't seem to have worked. How much would the lack of a kind of powerful middle order, how much would you think that would have been dominating the conversations around team selection and what the coaches and management are doing right now?
Yeah, Mark, it's a great question, multi-layered from an answer perspective. And I suppose I'll start with, I think a lot of the teams across the world are trying to figure out what to do in that middle phase, right? So you'll see teams like potentially England or Australia who just keep trying to press on the accelerator. Let's leave India aside because they're completely on a different planet at the moment when it comes to playing T20 cricket. So you've got to try and work out, what are your players' strengths and how we can adapt and tweak what we've got to the best of our ability. In saying that, I think I'm not too worried at this point in time with that middle order in Sri Lanka, because I think a lot of focus is going to be placed on spin, even in Palakeli around the middle order. So we've got guys who can play that. I think where the question mark's going to come in, and someone mentioned it earlier, was, we've only got Dasun who can really clear the fence towards the end. Wanindu can do it, but he tends to do it against spin. So how you use him, if spinners are dominating that middle period, we might see him come up the order. I don't know if the coaches have spoken about it or if that's been looked at. But teams are also onto that. So when you send him in, they're going to bring pace on, and hope then they keep their spinners for a little bit later. And so that's going to be key for me, how they figure out. It's more a case of, I think they need to get ahead of the game in the first 6 to 10 overs, sort of then just keep with the game in the middle period. Don't try too much. Guys can score at a runner ball, maybe just a little bit more. We've got, for me, it'll be interesting because Kamindu, correct me if I'm wrong, they've only recently brought him back into the squad, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting one for me. Are they bringing him in to play, or are they bringing him in to be a backup to Charith? Because ultimately, I think also what every team tries to do is in that middle period, you try and have a left-hand, right-hand combination, purely for, there might be a short side of the field, or if teams are bringing on matchups like a left-arm spinner, you want a left-handed batter facing. If they bring on an off spinner, you want a right-hander facing. So if they can break that up in the middle, it becomes a bit tactical in the middle, if I can put it that way. So yeah, I'm not too worried about it in Sri Lanka. I think where you'll see us potentially fall behind is that if we make it through to the Super 8s, and if we go even further into Indian conditions, smaller grounds, better batting wickets, teams are going to be way ahead of the run rate. Is Sri Lanka then able to keep up with that? That is the question mark.
I don't know if you go on other podcasts, because I know you've worked on a lot of different international teams, and say, you might be on, because I know you work with the Dutch, you might be on a Dutch podcast and calling them we as well. But I'm really loving this we, Anton. It's really
I mean, I've caught myself saying that a few times now, but my wife's got a Sri Lankan necklace around her neck. My son was born in Sri Lanka. I really enjoyed my time there for the 3 years that I was there. So, for this World Cup and especially for Group B, I'm 100% Sri Lankan. That's for sure.
I don't know how old your son is, but is he able to clear the boundary?
Not yet. He's 2, but they've just started playing cricket with each other. So a bit of a rolly ball and a couple of sweep shots and that sort of thing. So it's pretty cool to see. Yeah.
Sweep shot sounds promising already for anyone born in Sri Lanka. Yeah. Sorry, Nick, you were about to say something.
I was going to ask how Anton sees the Charith Kamindu debate, having worked with them both up close. Do you see what would you say their particular kind of virtues and weaknesses are, Anton? And would you, if you were in the selection panel, would you fall down on one side, or would you be fairly toss up? Because I think, haven't been able to quite decide between them.
You said Charith, Kamindu, and
just the 2 of them.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Charith has slipped into a bit of a dip in form lately. But the time that I was there, he was the other guy that could clear the fence in the middle. 50 over cricket seems to fit into his DNA a little bit easier and better than the 20 over cricket does. Whereas Kamindu, I think, gives you a bit more 360 around the park. He can play reverse sweeps. He's good on the normal sweep shot. He also needs to take a bit of time to get in and then start clearing the fence. But, these guys, it's not like they can't clear the fence. My question mark is, can they do it within the first 6 balls that they face and carry on from there? So I'm sure it's something that they've been working on. But the 2 are quite same in a sense of they can offer you a bit with the ball, they can offer you a bit with the bat. Both can clear the fence in slightly different areas. But yeah, T20 cricket's all about form, and it's all about the intent within the first couple of balls that you face. So from a coaching perspective and a selection perspective, you've got to have your finger on the pulse there with these 2 guys of who's in form, who's able to take the game on from ball 1. And those are, again, question marks that that those 2 guys have to answer.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Anton. I think the point of how you get into your innings, right, is a really big question, right? Because whether you play out a few dot balls or can you score early on, do you feel like that's a technical question or that's a mentality issue? Because I think, especially given Sri Lanka's collapses in the middle order, I wonder if some of the players are being told to be careful in the first few balls. But I'm curious how you see that sort of problem playing out.
Look, we as a coach, I always have a saying like, conditions override everything. Okay, so you can have the best intent in the world, but if the conditions in front of you are saying, well, hang on, today's 180% strike rate is actually a 100% strike rate, then you've got to be able to adapt to that. So I think it's definitely conditions based, and then it becomes technical. I think the intent always has to be there. In T20 cricket, the way the modern game has gone, the way India is taking the game sort of away from everyone else, is you have to have that intent with you at all times from ball one. The adaptability, and this is where it gets a bit technical from a batting perspective, then comes into what the conditions tell you. If everyone agrees that it's a great deck, well, you've got to have the ability to strike the ball cleanly and often for boundaries in order to keep up with the run rate. But I think the intent should always be there, but it is based around conditions, if that answers the question.
Anton, as we're getting into kind of technique and around batting, from your experience of Sri Lanka, because a lot of people say that we just don't have or don't produce players who can find the boundary as frequently as they need to for kind of modern T20 cricket. Do you think there's a kind of technical issue with the way players are being coached through the system?
Potentially. I think, I don't think it's anything that you haven't heard before in terms of if you go sort of into the NSL and into the club cricket, you're not necessarily playing on these fantastic wickets that are conducive to high scores, right? So the guys aren't really exposed as much to that as what they should be, ideally, from a coaching perspective. So you've got to find ways and means around how to combat that. Do they do that at the HPC? Absolutely. I've seen them put those marble things down on the ground and they practice, so there are ways and means doing that. But we all know the best form of practice is during a match, So I think Chris Silverwood even said it in our times, like we've got to try, Sri Lanka's got to try and shift away from these spin dominated wickets as much as they can to try and expose the players to top end cricket where, if you go to a place like Delhi or to Mumbai or to Hyderabad, where all of a sudden you're playing on this batting paradise and like 250 is par, like mentally, how do you go into bat chasing when you see runs on the board needed 250? Like Sri Lankan players would never have been exposed to that at a lower level, right? So from a mental perspective, it flips you over completely, So I think you've got to try your best. Conditions in our game means everything, And just further on to that point, actually, I was talking about it the other day with some of my cricket friends and coaches. We sort of catch up every now and then, talking about the intent to strike the first 10 balls that you face after a wicket falls. Sri Lanka rise at 95%. And the highest for the first 10 balls is Australia and India at about 120, 125. So that's the difference between 7 and over and 5 and over within the first 10 balls that you face. And this is in the last 2 years. So on the surface, it might not sound a lot, but if that keeps going, all of a sudden that middle period, teams like India and Australia are 30, 40 runs ahead of you before the back end comes, So the intent to score those boundaries off your first 10 balls is crucial in the modern game.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Hold on. I was going to talk about, because we started to talk about decks. I was going to talk about what our wicket taking abilities are, because we're looking at the squad still. So obviously we've got Wani, Walalage, Deeks, Chamira, Patarana, and as I said earlier, Ishmaelinga is likely being replaced by Dilshan Madishankar, we think. Anton, if you've got that kind of bowling lineup and you look at the composition, you look at the rest of the squad, and you know that there might be weaknesses in terms of trying to accrue runs or the rate that you accrue runs, do you think we should at least think a little bit more about leaning more into our bowling as that's our strength? Or is there something that us mere non-coaching muggles are missing here?
No, I think you're spot on there, Mark. Like, and that's why I said, all of us have agreed in the beginning that the first 6 overs, the more you look at it, the first 6 overs from a bowling and a batting perspective is absolutely crucial. And if I was the opposition, I would 100% be targeting Sri Lanka's first 6 overs, because I know that the middle phase will be absolutely dominated by world-class spin bowling. So you want to try and get ahead of the rate, so that you don't have to, necessarily put the spinners under the pump. Once Wanindu gets into that phase of having to take wickets, he likes to throw the ball up a little bit more, which also means that he goes for slightly more runs. Yes, he takes wickets, but the rate keeps going and going and going. So if someone, and I'm hoping that, Matisha or Dushi did really well for us in the IPL at Delhi. If those two guys are in form and they can break through and get us a few wickets in the first 6, then I think you'll see a guy like Wanindu just clean up in this tournament, because he, as soon as a guy comes in and is looking to be defensive against Wanindu in the first 3 to 4 balls, he's all over you like a rash, So I think that is key. That is absolutely key from how we treat our first 6 from a bowling perspective, but at the same time also from a batting perspective.
I just wonder, if you were looking at this squad and you were thinking about what, when you're trying to put your 11 together from this bunch, how would you go about it? Do you think about what the opposition bring specifically? Do you think about what conditions you'd expect from a certain pitch? Do you think about your strengths? Do you think batting first, bowling first, or do you think, right, who are my match winners? These are the 4 guys or 5 guys most likely to win me matches. How do I get them in and put them into the positions which optimize their ability to win games? What's your kind of philosophy around how teams should be put together?
Well, I'm quite a big believer in horses for courses, but then obviously you need the squad to be able to do that, and you'd have to have played a lot of games or be afforded a lot of games to start figuring out what's needed. I think you guys you've watched more games of Sri Lanka recently than I have, but Sri Lanka seem to have, they sort of stick to a similar sort of game plan around what they like to pick and play at Premadasa. Am I right? So normally we play with two seamers. Dasun might be the third seamer, and then the rest is all spin. Correct. So unless something's changed in the past, I'm not too sure, but that's normally how they go about it. And then they like the wicket to be a little bit slower, so that gives them the opportunity to dominate that middle phase. And I think everyone sort of knows that if Premadasa plays like it plays, you'd want to win the toss and bat first. Whereas in Palakele, I think it's slightly the other way around. Because of the smaller nature of the ground, better paced wicket, you're more likely to clear the fence. So, everyone can remember the chase that we had there against Australia when Dasun played his magical knock. So I think that will be in the back of his mind as well. So from that perspective, I don't think it necessarily changes too much what I haven't seen Sri Lanka pick a completely different team unless they're losing. Then they like to tinker with it. But I think you'll see a pretty similar 11 for all 4 games.
Fascinating insight. Dineth has asked, must ask at some point 6-5 or 7-4. What's your take on that, Anton?
6-7 or?
I don't think we're allowed to say that on this show. How would you break it down? 6-5 or 7-4?
Yeah, I think my mind's telling me. I mean, my heart's telling me 6-4, but I think they'll go the other way.
Yeah. I suspect they might think it's too late to change. I don't know what you think about that, Estelle.
I mean, this has been the conversation for like many of the previous World Cups as well, right? We've been pushing for Wanindu to kind of take on that number 7 role and provide that extra bit of cushion for the bowlers. But it's something I think we all know at the end of the day that it's not going to happen, right? It's very unlikely that the Sri Lankan management will go with that 6-5 combo, just because it seems like, and you guys discussed this in the previous episode as well, about like the remedy to a collapse. I mean, the action they seem to take is adding more batting, whereas that doesn't necessarily add more value to the score, because how many deliveries is a number 8 going to face, or number 7 going to face, right, at the end of the day, if you're trying to arrest a collapse. So we want it to be 6-5. I think the 5 of us can agree that like we want it to be 6-5, but it's unlikely that it will be 6-5.
I still think, and you know, I'd love to know what you all think about this, but I still think in Sri Lankan cricket, there's still a hang up about not batting your 50 overs or your 20 overs. And because of that, you end up trying to put kind of insurance options in. But actually, at this stage of where cricket's at, there is no shame in if you get skittled out for 100 runs inside 12 overs. I don't think there's any shame in that. A loss is a loss, right? But I think there's still people within Sri Lanka, and there's people in our own family, Dom, who think it's embarrassing not to bat 20 overs. Well, I think you've got to be a bit more braver than that in this game.
Yeah. I think the way I think of it is that every ball is a resource to be used when you're batting, and that resource is to be used to score runs, right? That's fundamentally what it comes down to in a T20 game. And I think what's going to impact Sri Lankan performance more than how many batters they have is the way, as Anton said, they approach their innings, how they set it up, how they suss out the conditions, and then go about it. I want to see more of those like quick fire 20s and 30s, where, at least on good wickets, right, where our players make a contribution and keep the run rate going and don't fall to that 95 or, God forbid, lower than that in terms of a strike rate when they first come to the crease.
Guys, should we move on a little bit? I'll remove the squad, go back into our regular formation, and should we have a chat about kind of, I don't want to plot Sri Lanka's path all the way to the final, but let's have a chat about the group stages, or the group stage, and what we think where Sri Lanka might come unstuck. Sanuda's written, Oman beat Zimbabwe in the warm-up game. It's not going to be easy. Estelle, you can tell us more about this. If you've been scheduled to have a warm-up game in Colombo, it's not gone particularly well for any side, has it?
Yeah, and this actually ties into the conditions that Anton was talking about, right? Like, you're likely to get spin-friendly conditions. And I think, to be honest, if there's any control for the co-hosts, that would be a good option against teams like Oman and Zimbabwe, because just watching them go about things on flat tracks, their batters can really do some damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need 1 or 2 batters to get going, and they can really do some damage. In today's game, Oman chased down 188 with like an over to spare, right, against Zimbabwe, who've got like Ngarawa, they've got Buzarabani, they've got Graham Creamer, they've got like seasoned campaigners in their side, right? But they just were not able to challenge Omani batting lineup, which not many of us have seen much of, right? Similarly, Zimbabwe as well, Paul Bennett, Brendan Taylor, all of them got runs.
Mm-hmm.
So flat tracks actually, come tournament times in Sri Lanka, have not been, regularly playing on pitches like that. That might, turn out to be tricky when they're facing teams like Zimbabwe, Oman, even Ireland, because for teams like that, it takes 1 or 2 batters to get going. And then you're suddenly chasing like 170, 180. And the pressure is on because you're expected to beat these sides, right? Like Australia set you 180, you have nothing to lose. You can go after it. But Oman sets you 180. Suddenly, there is all this pressure on Pathum Nissanka or Kusal Mendes, because you're expected to beat those teams. So as much as I hate like having all this, in Sri Lanka, in Sinhalese, you call it the Kumburu pitches, like paddy fields, right? As much as we hate seeing it, like in the build-up, now that we've come to the tournament, maybe a pitch that would assist someone like Vanidhu Hasaranga would prove beneficial, because he'd be the difference between the two teams, like when it comes to those types of teams.
This is interesting, Estelle, because I think that right now our batting is worse against spin, significantly worse against spin than it is against pace. And I think that they could actually score big runs if they played on more sporting decks. And so, because I've been thinking about this question is what type of pitch do you want to play a team? Because I think when you have what we saw in the last England game is you saw Will Jackson, Jacob Bethel spin the ball square. And Wanindu is a much more skilled spinner than those guys. But when the pitch turns like that, you take the skill required to, get a batter out of it. And I think that's one of the things we haven't really recognized in playing sort of in not going with what, say, Chris Silverwood and Mahela spoke about in playing sort of truer pitches, is that a world-class bowling lineup. Matisha Patarana, right? He takes the pitch out of the equation because he's bowling Yorkers at you. Wanindu Hasaranga, Mahesh Deekshanath, these guys are wanted all across the world because they can bowl on whatever pitches. But now if you're creating pitches that allow even average spinners to turn the ball massively, then I think you're closing the gap between the sides. That's my point of view. But I think, but I also get what you're saying too, Estelle, that it is scary to think about chasing 180 against any side.
Yeah. I totally understand your point, Dom. At this point, I think for me, just looking at the teams, I'm backing Oman to be worse against spin than Sri Lanka is, because as you said, like Sri Lanka was really bad in that series against England, right? And it's something we've seen across the board. It's not just T20 cricket, even in Test cricket. It pushed it too far with the like relying on Prabhat Jayasuriya and just making spin friendly conditions. And then when you come up against quality sides, you're closing the gap between your good bowlers and their part-timers, right? In this case, I would say I would back our batters, despite not having performed as well against spin, to be better than players that are coming from countries that don't face these conditions that often.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in there quickly, I think the key is the balance as well. So I don't necessarily, when pitches are that spin friendly, I think they've probably gone too far on that side. What I've seen and where I've seen Sri Lanka play their best cricket on wickets like that is when the wicket is not necessarily free scoring against spin or pace. Then our world-class spinners will still extract way more off the pitch than the opposition's spinners. But yes, I agree 100% with Dom. If you go too far the one way, then the likes of a Will Jacks or a Bethel can also come in and make you look a little bit worse for wear. So it's finding that balance of you just want the wicket to not be as free scoring, because then it allows Sri Lanka's spinners to really rise to the top because they are world class. So. But in saying that, how much, do we have a big say in what the pitches are like in ICC events? I'm sure.
So it's.
Sorry, Estelle, Carol.
So yesterday, I had an interesting chat with Angelo, actually, who's on the commentary panel, and he seemed to suggest that the co-hosts have a bit of a say. Okay. I don't know whether it's like an unsaid thing, but he seemed to suggest that. That there is some influence from the hosts or co-hosts when it comes to pitches. Yeah.
I mean, the ICC don't send their own groundsman in, right? It's still the SLC groundsman just working under an ICC mandate, supposedly. Is that right?
It should be, yeah.
So, I mean, you would think that it's not going to be hugely different to what we've been seeing, if maybe slightly more batting friendly.
Yeah, especially if it's your own country. I mean, I would be highly, highly, highly surprised come the first game that Ireland are treated to a run fest. It's just not going to happen. I can't see it happening.
And as you say, Anton, slightly better than the paddy fields we've been used to without being total roads might be the perfect balance for Sri Lanka. Yeah. And I think, Dom, it was you who touched on Patarana. I think he's going to be the real trump card for Sri Lanka through these group games. You saw how much England's batters struggle to deal, particularly with that slower ball. When everything's coming at 150 and then he can throw in that off cutter that no one can pick. It's really, really hard. And I would think that that's going to be clearer against sort of players who aren't used to facing 150k slingers all the time?
Yeah, I was gonna say, right, like when we play the teams we've played a lot, and we play teams that have players that have played in the IPL, it's a little bit different. But Oman and Ireland and even Zimbabwe haven't faced Pathirana much, and he looks. This is the biggest positive I took from the England series, is he looks very, very good. He was bowling in the power play, which is a quiver we added in, and Anton was saying that winning that power play is going to be so crucial. And I love that combination with Dushmantha Chamira and Matisha bowling in the power play.
Anton, I do have a question for you. With bowlers like Pathirana and even Tushara, how when you come into a setup like that, or they come into the setup, because I suppose Pathirana would have come in when you were already established there. What can you do if you're their bowling coach in terms of kind of advising them, because their body's working totally differently to everyone else's, right?
So I think, like, with the advent of leagues around the world and the amount of games that these guys play, trying to keep them fit and strong and keeping them on the park has sort of gone away from the bowler's coach's responsibility. At least this is the way I see it. It's like there's a very few bowling coaches out there anymore that can do both the tactical and the technical side of things. I think with guys like Matisha and Tushara, the less technical that you are with them, the better, because they have unique attributes that have gotten to this stage in the first place. So why would you want to tinker things? If there's something that really jumps out from a run-up point of view, absolutely, you might have to have a look at that. But from a technical point of view, I wouldn't do anything when it comes to that. For me, it would all be around, what is your game plan? What is your feel to this guy? How do you think under pressure? I would try and make that connection between him and the captain as close as possible, so that during the game they're connected. What you want to see from a coaching perspective is you want to see a bowler who's at the top of his mark. He knows what his field's going to be. He knows who he's bowling at. In his mind, he's done his homework. What is his strengths? What is his weaknesses? Given the conditions that they're playing on at this moment, what are my options? Is it a slow ball bumper? Is it pace on? Is it Yorker? Is it wide hole? Can I jump between the 3 or 4 of those options in my 6 balls? Those are the sort of things that you want to try and nail down from a coaching perspective prior to the tournament, so that once those games happen, it just runs smoothly. But so often we see guys, when they're under the pump, especially at the top of their mark, they don't know what they're doing. They keep the same field. It becomes too, two of the same stuff. The batsman's way ahead of him. He's 2 balls ahead of him already, and all of a sudden you see that over go for 19 or 22, and that's the game right there. So it's how can you minimize those overs to, say, get out of the over having gone for 12 or maybe even 15 rather than a blowout in 22. And that all comes down to setting your field, knowing what ball you want to bowl, being nice and clear at the top of your mark. And I think your captain plays a huge role in that.
A question I've got that's absolutely fascinating stuff, and it sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done before the bowler steps into the pitch, and it's, I suppose, kind of 3 days out. It's too late to ask if that work's been done or not.
Look,
I don't want to know the answer in case it hasn't.
It's to slightly go on to the top of that point. Like when I was bowling coach of the Proteas and we played our T20 series against India, we should have won the first game in Durban. We didn't quite have our plans sorted out towards the end. We had a great game in Port Elizabeth where everything just worked for us, our plans and this, that, and next. But if you want to know what it's like being under the pump, you fast forward to the game at Wanderers when they scored 230 in the first 15 overs, I think it was. The ball's flying all over the place. You don't know what to do. The bowler's under the pump. Like that is where your coaching comes in, and that is where your planning as a captain and as a bowler comes in. I know I'm talking about the extreme there, but the World Cup will also bring out the extremes for everyone. There's going to be, as Dal mentioned it earlier, there's going to be way more pressure. There normally is anyway in a World Cup, especially for the Sri Lankans being in their home crowd. Yes, it's nice to play in front of your home crowd, but that brings that sort of expectation as well. So basically what I'm trying to say is like, now's not the time to think technical. Now's the time to really sort out what your plans are, what works for you. I don't want to see a guy bowling a wide hole Yorker when actually his strength is bowling pace off. Like you should have been doing that way before this tournament. Like now you need to stick to your strengths, know what your best balls are given the conditions, set the right field, execute that ball, get the other guy on strike, get out of the over, and pass the ball to Wanindu to break the game open for you.
Nick, I want to come to you because you're the eccentric Englishman on this call. What do we have any idea what pitches are like in Oman? Because we were talking like, oh yeah, they're not going to be able to play our pitches, but I mean, how do pitches play in Oman? Do they even have real cricket pitches? Are they playing?
I don't think I've ever seen a game of cricket in Oman. I mean, I guess it's very close to the UAE, right, where the pitches are normally slightly slower, tackier, not necessarily like 180, 200 pitches. They've also got Duleep at the helm, who has been their coach for like a really long time now, basically since he retired in like 1991. And it's an experienced team, right? I don't know their squad intimately, but when you look through, there's a lot of guys in their late 30s approaching 40. So I'm sure they'll have played on some dodgy wickets before. I think though that like every team in this group, apart from Sri Lanka, will go into it thinking that they'd rather be in India, right? That they'd rather be playing on roads with smaller boundaries. And yeah, I think that's like a huge advantage for Sri Lanka going through the group stage.
I just want to say something about Oman there quickly. They've got an unbelievable facility as their main ground. It is world class. I know a couple of county sides have gone there for camps in the past. We've actually played there with the Dutch team a few times, and it's unbelievable. But the thing that you must understand from a team like Oman, and I'm circling them right now, is that they will undoubtedly know what it's like to play on lesser favored wickets, because of course they play in the associate nations where a couple of tiers down, that you're not afforded the luxury of playing on these roads. So that's one thing in their camp, positive for their camp. The other thing is associate cricket is cutthroat. Like if you lose a couple of games there, you could potentially lose your funding. You drop down a place or two in the rankings. Your playing playing time or playing exposure gets cut, all that sort of stuff. So they know how to handle pressure, because the pressure there is immense. They see this World Cup as like, we're just going to go have fun. They can't wait to go and play in front of a big crowd and put up, an upset against one of these big teams. So I think from that perspective, those teams come into a tournament like with a clean slate, and they are very, very, very dangerous. And so you need to be, you need to take every game as if you're playing against Australia. Every game. That's what I would be preaching to the team.
I was just going to say, Mark, I think that is probably arguably the most important thing that you can be telling the Sri Lankan players at this point. You're not just going to turn up to these matches and win. It's going to be a dogfight for everyone. So you've got to be mentally prepared, be on top of your game. And honestly, that's the best thing, that if this team is to do something competitive, serious in this tournament, it's going to be being organized, disciplined, and ready to play at every single moment. And that will carry over and have a lot of weight going forward.
Yeah.
What's made me nervous from this conversation is we've spent a lot of time talking about losing to Oman, when even if we beat Oman, that's not going to be enough. Do we have enough in us to beat Ireland, Zimbabwe, and/or Australia? And I'm just going to throw this out there. Whoever wants to answer it can answer it. How do you beat these sides?
I'll go first. I think, look, Ireland are no pushover either. An ex-colleague of mine, Heinrich Milan, is their head coach. He's a student of the game. He's very disciplined. Their team will be well coached. They will not leave any stone unturned when it comes to, facing a team like Sri Lanka. I think they've got an unbelievable bowler in a guy called Mark Adair. If there's any movement on up for grabs, he will extract it either in the air or off the pitch. So it'll be extremely important of how we get to face him. But truth be told, I think that's probably, and I say this with a pinch of salt, but I think that's their only sort of real weapon that they have. So from a batting perspective, I think it's just sort of getting through that phase, seeing him off. And you would like to think if Ireland come to Premadasa, they're going to get given the same old Premadasa wicket. They're not a great team against spin. The only thing that I will say there is that you've got Paul Sterling up front. Paul Sterling, when he's on song, and you've only got two fielders outside the ring, it's tough bowling to a guy like that. Okay, so I would agree. We're going to be saying the same thing over and over again, but those first 6 overs is just absolutely crucial against any team. And I think if you can come up with an ingredient or a way to go about that, you don't really have to prepare against which side you're playing against. It's all about how can we execute those first 6 overs.
Another thing is, I think if you look at the group that Sri Lanka is in, all those 3 teams that are ranked lower than Sri Lanka, they'll be looking at Sri Lanka thinking this is the big team that we can beat, right? They're unlikely to be looking at a team like Australia and thinking, look, we've got a real, of course you tell yourself that, but realistically, Sri Lanka is the team they're going to be looking at and thinking, look, if we can get a win against Sri Lanka, going through to the next round is a real possibility, right? So I think that's going to be another big challenge, because it's not going to be, in the past, we may have had tournaments where teams come in, they're intimidated, that plays on their minds, what kind of batting lineup are we going to face from Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka have got these explosive batters, great bowling attack, all of that. This time around, I feel like there's certainly going to be that bit of, fire in their bellies, thinking this is the team that we can beat, and this is our road, our path to the next round.
Yeah, 100%.
Go on, Tom.
I was going to say, also Josh Little in the power play is something that does worry me with that left arm angle. Sri Lanka has tended to struggle against those left armers, and Garava too. Those are the things that I think are going to be crucial. Is like, can you manage those first 6 overs without losing a ton of wickets? I think the other bit that will be interesting is if someone plays sort of a whirlwind knock, one of those teams has a guy who scores 50 off of 15 balls, how do you respond to it? Because guess what? It happens. That's cricket, right? Teams aren't going to roll over and die just because you're higher ranked. So how do you respond to that? What kind of approach can you take? Can you keep your head calm? And, how do you approach it? And I think Ireland's playing at the Premadasa, right? So that's going to be, I'm imagining it's going to be very spin friendly, and Zimbabwe is as well. So part of me thinks that's very intentional that those two teams are playing at the Premadasa, whereas Oman and Australia are at Pellekele.
I was going to say that, I wished we were playing Australia at Pellekele, at Premadasa, because clearly their top 7 is their strength, right? Outside of India, I reckon it's probably the best in the tournament, but they're guys who are going to all look to go really hard, right? Marsh, Head, Green, Maxwell, Stoinis, David. And I think if they get served up a real minefield, that's actually a game that Sri Lanka could win.
I mean, we've kind of beaten them in recent history as well, right? At home.
And at Pellekele.
Yeah. So
it's
I don't know what you think about this, Anton, because you've been with the side. I think with Sri Lanka, a lot of it is confidence, right?
I think a big plus for us on that point is, Stark's retired, and Cummins is not there. Those are 2 huge guys, not just in stature, but like huge players for them. So I think from an out and out pace perspective, there's not much that the guys will be, on the back, leaning on the back foot per se. So potentially that's why they thought, let's just go to Pellekele and make it see who can hit the most boundaries type vibe. Or maybe it was, they had to split between the two venues. I'm not too sure. But I actually quite like playing on Palakele because our guys they're not necessarily power hitters. They're more stroke players. So we need the ball to come onto the bat a little bit more for us in order for us to clear the fence. I think at a ground like Primadasa, you've got to either have a really bad ball to be able to hit, or you've got to have unbelievable strength and power to clear the fence from that perspective. So, yeah, I mean, we could probably discuss conditions the whole night, but that'll be my 2 cents worth for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's, to me, on a turning pitch, I'm scared of the guys like Stoinis and David who can just muscle it and get it over the ropes, right? Whereas on Pelakele, it's a little bit more even because I think Kusal or Potham, maybe they're not as strong as them, but as stroke players, they can find the boundary on true wickets.
Yeah.
I think, is Hazelwood out for the whole group stage too, right?
There was something like that, right? Yeah.
I think that's what I've seen. And then you're left with actually quite an inexperienced, like, seam attack.
Yeah.
Nathan Ellis has been talked up a lot, but he's more of a defensive bowler, right? And then you've got Dwasius and Bartlett, both two guys who are quite inexperienced. I think it'll be both of their first major tournament, Champions Trophy aside. So it's not quite like the same old Australia that we're used to seeing. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys that were like groomed as the next gen, I'm thinking guys like Fraser McGurk, Aaron Hardy, what's the left arm called? Spencer Johnson, haven't like come through and pushed on. So I don't know, maybe it's a slight like side in transition that isn't quite what it has been at past tournaments. I'm picking
and they just got swept by Pakistan in Pakistan.
Like majorly as well, right? They were getting bowled out for less than 100 and stuff, right? So,
it wasn't their full squad. Like, I don't think Maxwell and David played, but
so kind of going like, what do we think? Sri Lanka should make it out of this group, right? Like, I'm not saying they won't be hairy moments. We all remember Namibia, but But I mean, if we're not making this out of this group with this talented batch of players that we've kind of got, something's gone seriously wrong here, right?
Yeah, I think coming back to my earlier point, like against those teams, if Sri Lanka plays at 100% of its potential, and so do those other teams, I think Sri Lanka should still easily win those games of cricket. It's can we do that for those 3 games? That's the key. Can we play to our best of our ability and make sure that the guys treat those games as a crucial game? I think that'll be the key. And if that's the case, I've got no doubt that we'll go through to the next round for sure.
I'm super excited about the World Cup. I know the last week or so in Sri Lankan cricket has been a bit tough watching England come in and tear us apart in T20 cricket when we thought that should kind of be, I don't want to say easy games, but we should have been a bit more competitive than we were. But I always feel with Sri Lanka, and maybe it's because just my age where I saw us win tournaments, that was the first thing I remember almost from watching Sri Lanka play cricket. And then going into the 2010s where they were, we were so consistently good at major tournaments. I always think weirdly we kind of can have the ability to rise to the occasion. We probably need to wrap this up now. We've taken a lot of Anton's time up. I don't care about everyone else's time on this call.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
I just wanted to get, and I know the last time you came on the show, but that was a while ago. We talked about this as well. I just wanted to get from you what you remember, what it was like when we won the Asia Cup, and kind of inject some good feelings and good vibes into Murali End before we we roll into kind of full World Cup anxiety mode.
Yeah, Mark, funny. Yeah, I mean, funny you mentioned it because I think about it quite a lot, really. I think what really stands out for me in that tournament, and maybe not so much for everyone else, but for me, like the turning point in that tournament was Asitha Fernando scoring those crucial runs against Bangladesh. That sort of got us over the hump in a must-win game. And then from there, it was just like, it just snowballed, everything that we did it seemed to work. You know, guys were in form. Our fielding was amazing, especially in the final. But yeah, it's just those small little moments that stick out that won us a battle or a game. You know, beating Pakistan twice was amazing, and obviously getting over the line against India was cool. I think what was also nice was, and whether this was actually a factor or not, I'm not sure, but it was played in probably the hottest time of the year in Dubai. And so our trainings were capped at 2 hours. Each team wasn't allowed to train for longer than 2 hours, which for a Sri Lankan team is not a lot. And I can tell you, not only were the coaches happy about that, but I think it kept the players very fresh as well. And so that sort of played into our hands, because for some reason we train the longest and the most out of a lot of teams that I've been with, and why I'm not so sure. But I think that was definitely one of those, you know, not so much spoken of things at the time. But if I think back on it, that definitely helped us in that tournament, for sure. And then of course, you know, coming back into the airport and everyone's greeting you at the airport, and we're going on that bus tour and everything, that was unbelievable to be a part of. And I've got a lot of photos that remind me of you know, of that day. So those are really, really fond memories for me and for the team. In saying that, with the good comes the bad. Like I still think it was a missed opportunity that we never really kicked on from that, you know. I think we enjoyed the festivities a little bit too much, not from what we actually did on the night per se, or the next day. More a case of, I think the team potentially thought, okay, this is us now, it's our time, sort of thing. And the next couple of weeks, you know, we didn't really see the guys that much. And I just remember our lead up into the 2020 tournament, World Cup in Australia, wasn't what it was supposed to be. And so I think we missed out an opportunity to really build on that success. But yeah, to win an Asia Cup for Sri Lanka, yeah, it was good times. Great to be involved in, and something that I'll never forget.
What a great memories that was for all of us as well. It was incredible, wasn't it? Guys, should we wrap it up there? We're on the road to Ahmedabad now, and running off the back of 3 straight T20 defeats against England at home. I'm sure Sri Lanka can somehow kind of get into a groove and do what needs to be done to get us there. Anton, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you'll come back on soon. Maybe we'll get you on after one of the games. You can kind of give us a full breakdown.
Oh man, I'm like I said to you in a message, like I'm more than happy to do a match review with you guys if you're keen for that. But I'll echo your statement. I'm pretty. I don't get to watch a lot of cricket when I'm actually involved. But I'll definitely be keeping the TV on in this tournament just to see how the boys get on, because I know, you know, one thing we know is that the World Cup will dish up a story for someone, you know, whether it's a good one or a bad one, you're not really in control of that, but a story will be written for someone in this tournament, and hopefully it's a good one for the Sri Lankans.
Amazing. Guys, should we leave it there? We'll be back after the game on Sunday. Again, keep an eye on the Cricket Smash channel, on the Combox channel. We'll be live a few minutes after the end of the game. Hopefully everyone's, including my microphone, is working. We'll be with you swiftly afterwards, and we can celebrate, or we can have therapy, or whatever we need to do. We'll do it together. We're all in this together. We'll see you all then. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good seeing you again. Cheers.
It's the Murali End, you're in a place to be. Analyze the players and the team. Keep a great company in the stream. It's the Murali End. Welcome to the show. We're here when you're high. We're here when you're low. Some days you're happy, some days you wanna win. When happy it's we, when mad it's them. It's the same place, Murali End. Sri Lanka cricket we gon' represent. So tell a friend.